All right, so I'm gonna try another video here. I promise I'll keep it as quick as I can, although I can't guarantee how quick that'll be. So, title of this is gonna be, or is, kind of choosing elk hunting bullets. So, understand that for me to go in depth with like even just all the bullets I have set in front of you here, this video could easily take hours, right? We could talk bullet technology for days if we wanted to. There's just so much to go over. There's so many different characteristics of bullets. They perform vastly different, even in the same caliber and bullet weight, depending on design, stuff like that. So I'm going to do my best to keep this under about 25 minutes. I apologize in advance. I know my breathing sounds loud with this camera. It sounds like I'm wearing a scuba. I will work on doing something different in the future. I'm in good shape. I'm not a heavy breather. It just picks it up at a strange volume. So we're gonna go over, I guess, some decent options for elk hunting bullets. I am not gonna tell you the best elk hunting bullet for you because it really depends on your caliber, how you hunt, how far you plan on shooting, and stuff like that. So what I've kind of put together in front of me here is just a really good selection of stuff that I've seen people use for elk. We'll kind of go through them one at a time, and we'll talk about some stuff, some particular strengths and weaknesses of some of these bullets. So I will tell you, I don't live out west. I'm not an elk hunting guide. I am an extremely experienced firearms guy. I have a significant military and law enforcement background. I've been to ballistics lab, ballistic studies. I've shot bullets through just about anything you would ever want to shoot bullets through just to see what happens, especially in law enforcement as far as different penetration tests, gel tests, stuff like that. So I'm not basing this video on my vast experience with elk. I've seen probably around 10 elk killed. I'm basing this on my experience, just general overall, a lifetime of experience with shooting, ballistics, things like that. So before we start, I just want to hit on a couple of real common misconceptions that I hear. So the first one I want to touch on, and again, everything that I'm going to say today could have a caveat. You could argue every point I'm going to make just based on bullet design. But the first big thing I hear a lot from people that tends to catch me off guard is people think there's a definite direct correlation between velocity and penetration, right? And there is, but you have to understand that penetration is going to depend heavily on bullet design, with velocity, I would say, almost being a secondary factor. Now, I'll quantify that as best I can. I was reading a magazine article the other day in one of the major hunting magazines, and it was an article on the new Barnes Sierra Game King combination, which I think is excellent. Sierra Game King, from what I've seen, is an outstanding bullet. Unfortunately, they don't sell a lot of them locally, so they're really hard to find. But anyway, it said in the article, toward the end of it, from a very well-known writer, that beyond 400 yards, the Sierra Game King will still kill with proper shot placement, but he would lean toward a heavier mono or bonded bullet to optimize penetration when velocities fall off. And that really caught me off guard. And again, that's kind of the same thing I see and hear from a lot of people. They seem to think that high velocity equals deep penetration, right? That's kind of the misnomer, the myth that a lot of people have in their mind. The faster the round, the deeper the penetration, no matter what. That's kind of a blanket statement I've been hearing from people for many years. And that can be true. So I will tell you, if you're using like a monolithic bullet over here, like the TTSX, the CX, any of the monolithic coppers or the blended almost pure copper bullets, that is true. There is definitely a correlation between velocity and penetration. So in that case, yes, higher velocity will almost always equal deeper penetration. Same thing goes with like a terminal ascent, a much harder bullet, a stiffer bullet, the A-frame, I would say. Well, when we start getting toward the right side of these, and I've kind of lined these up left to right from the toughest bullets to the softest bullets, you're going to find that that's not necessarily true. Quite often the opposite is true. Higher velocity will actually equal less penetration because you get greater expansion up front and weight loss earlier on. So you start losing some of that sectional density. But again, there are exceptions to every rule. So just understand that with the monolithic, yes, higher velocity typically means higher penetration or deeper penetration. With the real soft bullets on the right end, higher velocity will often equal shallower or less penetration. And there's always a weird outlier, like this is a Spear Gold Dot bullet, basically the same design as a Federal Fusion. that one's kind of an outlier on its own because it expands to such a large diameter and it retains so much weight that it's not the weight retention, it's the diameter. So the fact that it expands to a significant diameter and retains that diameter actually limits penetration, which is why I think Federal does not market their fusion bullets for elk or bear. They're phenomenal in expanding to like almost 3 times bullet diameter and staying there. But because of that, they meet increased resistance, in tissue, and they don't. So it's kind of the first thing I wanted to touch on is just understand there's not always a direct correlation. That means that higher velocity equals deeper penetration. That's going to be specifically based on bullet design. So we're going to go through some of these bullets. I'm probably going to leave this camera on the stand most of the time so you don't have to watch me shake. But starting at the left, these are all options for elk, some better than others. Just my personal experience. The Barnes TTSX, right? And this is going to be true of any monolithic copper bullet. So anybody that makes one, you can basically throw them in here. I know there's little intricacies with each bullet or, slight differences. But again, I'm going to speak in generalities. Copper bullets, they are a very popular option for heavy game, for elk, stuff like that, because they're deep penetrating bullets, right? So across the board, you're probably going to get your best penetration of every bullet you see here with the monolithic copper bullets, bar none. I've seen it many times. It's very difficult to catch them in animals. The downside of a copper bullet is they need a little more velocity to function. So typically the manufacturers will say about 2,000 feet per second or above, which is going to limit your range a little bit, and you're going to get a little bit narrower wounding with them, especially at longer distances. So I've seen some phenomenal results with monolithic bullets, inside that 250 yards. Like, honestly surprising to me how much damage they do, just based on the fact that they don't typically expand as wide as a lot of these other bullets. But just understand that they're an excellent option for elk. Downside would be they're going to have a low BC. They're not going to be super aerodynamic. They're going to shed velocity faster than a lot of these other bullets. You're limited to about that 2,000 foot per second minimum velocity. I know manufacturers will claim they'll open slower, and some might, but I would be very leery of trusting that. And again, just a little bit less wounding at longer distances. If you're going to take long shots with them, it's going to be the opposite of what I'm going to recommend on the other side. You might want to try and put that through a front shoulder just to guarantee you get some good expansion. But overall, they're very popular. I know guys that shoot a lot of elk with them. They have great luck. Just understand that you got to kind of limit your range. So second from the left, Terminal Ascent. Terminal Ascent is, from what I'm seeing, I haven't seen a lot on game performance. I've obviously done what people do and watched and read reviews. From what I've seen of it, it's turning out to be a very good bullet. So it's got a high BC. It cuts the air fairly well. Again, they say it's designed to open up down to ridiculously slow velocities. We'll see what this one says in 308. So 0 to 900 yards. I would be very hesitant of that. Past about 600 yards, you're going to be under 1,800 feet per second. I think there'd be much better choices in caliber to shoot that far in an elk. But having said that, they remind me of the old Winchester failsafe. So the front is bonded, the back is basically a solid core. And what I've seen of these, they drive very deep, second only to like the monolithics and the Swift A-frame. Overall, they just seem to be a very well-constructed bullet. They definitely get a nod from me for elk size game. I think currently that's one of the absolute best choices on the market. The downside with that is they are expensive. Man, they're expensive. The component bullets are over $1 a piece, which is why I have a loaded box. So you don't, let me say this right away, you don't need to shoot super expensive ammo to kill elk, right? We're going to go through a lot of other options. As far as price, the Barnes, the monos are a little higher than some of the stuff on the right end, but generally not terrible. Do understand that with the monolithics, I've had really mixed results on accuracy. So some guns really like them and some guns just really don't. So make sure if you want to do that, you try some specific loads and you test them out. Accuracy, Terminal Ascent that I've seen, I've shot at 3 different calibers now, has all been very acceptable, around MOA, sometimes better. So we'll get into some of the old traditional, long-standing bullets. Nosler AccuBond, right? So again, AccuBond has been around a long time. they say that Nosler's goal with the AccuBond was simply to produce the performance of the partition with a higher BC, and in most cases I think they've done that. AccuBonds are, again, they're a little higher priced than the stuff on the right side here, but overall they're an outstanding bullet. They shed about 50-60%. They don't cleave onto that huge expansion diameter like the Fusions or the Gold Dots do. They tend to drive deep, and again, they're a very well-proven, well-tested, high-performing bullet. I would absolutely recommend, heavy for caliber AccuBonds in every caliber for elk. AccuBonds are just great bullets overall. Accuracy with them for me has been good. They can be a little more finicky than some of the flat base, but again, overall, they seem to shoot pretty well. My gun did not love them in 165 or 180. It does shoot them extremely well in 150. So again, some of that's just coming down to knowing your rifle, testing your rifle. But AccuBonds, again, just a glowing recommendation for elk size game, deer size game, stuff like that. They've got decent BCs. They're very well designed. Partition here, you can see the old Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation logo on there, hopefully. Again, just a very old mainstay of hunting bullets. That is what I use for elk out of my 308. I know there's sleeker, fancier, newer, higher BC bullets out there, but I've never seen a Nosler partition fail. I've seen them things drove through elk from, inside 80 yards to past 500 yards, and they just work every time. So Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation recommends AccuBonds and partitions if you look at their website, and there's a reason for that. Like these are both very time-tested, very well-proven bullets. The partition does an outstanding job. Again, it sheds enough weight and frontal diameter that rear core can continue to drive deep in elk. The only thing you're giving up with partitions is a little higher ballistics coefficient. They shed velocity a little faster, though still not nearly as fast as the TSX. And overall, just a phenomenal bullet for elk. I've had very good luck with them, and I would recommend them to everybody, out to normal hunting ranges, 400 to 500 yards. I will say the monos now have some longer range variations. I haven't tested them yet. If they function well at lower velocity, that's great. I think a lot of them, they're just a higher BC bullet. They're not softer, but we're going to keep moving here. Speer hot core. So in one of the videos I posted, the 308 for elk video, one of the guys said, hey, you really don't need to use Nosler partitions in the 308 with that velocity. And he's 100% spot on. Hot core is my go-to bullet. I don't know if you can see way off. You can't. To the right side, I just bought a box in 6.5 Creedmoor today. I keep hot core on hand for every Western hunting caliber I own, so that if we hit another huge bullet / component / ammo crisis, I have a bullet with a decent BC that's going to hold together, that's capable of taking elk in pretty much every caliber. They're very affordable. I just bought that box of 100 for $28. I've shot deer with them. I've loaded them in my nephew's 30-06 for elk, and again, they perform extremely close to the partition at about half the cost. So I would highly recommend, again, if you don't need a super high BC, super aerodynamic bullet, check out Speer Hot Core or the new Speer Impact. Speer's making really good bullets. The hot cores are extremely affordable, and they just really shoot well out of all the guns I have. So that gets a nod. They did include another Speer product here, the Gold Dot. This will also include the Federal Fusion. I know guys have shot elk with them. Federal does not list elk on their boxes. And again, I think the reason for that is they expand to just a massive diameter, and they hold that diameter, which limits their penetration. I'm not saying don't use it for elk. If I was going to use it, I would definitely use a high for caliber bullet weight, and I would try and keep it out of the shoulder just to get as much penetration as possible. But just wanted to throw a second Speer bullet up there. So getting into more of the traditional or affordable stuff, we got the Hornady Interlock. So Interlock is a great hunting bullet. That is what I generally shoot for practice out of all of my rifles, that or the hot core, simply because they're affordable and they just work very well. I know guys that have taken elk with Hornady Interlocks. Again, that's 180 grain soft point in 30 caliber. I would have absolutely no qualms shooting that, into an elk at out to 400 yards with a 308, a little farther with a 30-06. Interlocks are very well designed. They don't fly apart like some of the softer stuff way on the right side. They don't leave a ton of jacket and lead in your meat, stuff like that. And again, if you're looking for more of a traditional hunting bullet, I would not get it in the American whitetail line. That's loaded for deer with lighter bullets. But if you find it in a heavier for caliber bullet, Hornady Interlock can be an excellent choice for elk. You are going to give up some BC. Again, they're not super aerodynamic, but out to traditional ranges, they work very well. So next, we got the Remington Core-Lokt. You can also include the Core-Lokt tipped. Again, just another like super old mainstay of elk hunting. That's 150 grain. I would go with 165 or 180. They just work. I like the interlocks and I like the Core-Lokts because they have mechanical means of bonding the lead to the jacket. So you're not going to have a lot of jacket separation with those bullets. They're both handicapped by fairly low ballistics coefficients. They're not super aerodynamics, but out to traditional ranges, they work well. I talked to an old timer last year out in Montana. He had shot, he thought 70 plus elk with his 7 mag, and he was just running factory, I want to say 160 grain Remington Core-Lokt. He had never once questioned whether or not it was good enough. He just went out, killed elk with it, and took home meat. So another good option. Again, I think modern trend is to focus on super high ballistics coefficient bullets, and we're giving up really good, well-constructed, solid bullets in a lot of cases as a result of that. Although, like the Federal now is really pushing the end with high BC, you know, tough bullets that are going to expand at lower velocities and punch deep. So on to the infamous ELDX. So I would venture a guess that there are as many elk shot every year with the ELDX as damn near everything else on this table combined, just based on the people I talk to and the people I see when I'm out hunting. This has been the rage now for probably the last 8 to 10 years, simply because it's a very high ballistics coefficient bullet, right? You can stretch probably an extra 100 yards out of a lot of the common calibers and still get that 1,800 feet per second impact velocity that manufacturers recommend. I will say I've seen 3 elk shot with ELDX bullets. I have not yet witnessed a bullet failure. All of them have worked. All but one passed through, although they were in 300 Win Mag. The only bang flop we've ever had on elk was with the 6.5 Creedmoor 143 ELDX, but that was an 80-yard shot straight into the heart. That was an optimal angle, I guess, and scenario for that bullet. I will just caution you. I load them in my 6.5 Creedmoor, my backup gun. That's not my main elk hunting gun. I know 6.5 Creedmoor for elk, blah blah blah. It will work though. I've seen it work. I load them in that, you know, but I feel like for me, if I'm spending, again, I live in Minnesota, it's at least $2,000 for me to go on an elk hunt between the tag, the gas, some lodging, the food, stuff like that. If I'm spending that kind of money on a hunt, I'm going to be over at least in this area. I want to make sure that the one thing that actually contacts the animal is going to perform the way I want it to. And again, I'm not saying don't use ELDX. It's probably the most common and popular elk hunting bullet out there, but I will say that I know guys that I trust that have told me that they've failed to have good penetration with them, you know, shooting elk shoulders up close. So pick your shots with that. Be conscious that you're not going to get the penetration out of that you're going to get with the stuff over here, and just make good choices. Way on the right end, we're going to touch on a couple things. I know a lot of guys use ballistic tips for elk. That's a 120. I would not even consider that in a 6.5. That's just what I have on hand for my 6.5 Grendel. Again, ballistic tips can work. I would not personally recommend them for elk. I know, again, if you're shooting straight into the vitals or if you're shooting at longer ranges, they can be a really good bullet, but they're a very soft bullet. They shed weight very quickly. And again, there's just no real guarantee of deep penetration with that. And if you can see here in the back here, the old AMAX, I would compare that a lot to the ballistic tip. I actually have a buddy that shot elk with the AMAX. He's had good luck with it, but he is hunting an area where he knows all of his shots are going to be long, 400 plus yards. He's an actual sniper. He's a very good shooter. He uses it. He's had good luck with it. I would not recommend it. Again, there's just nothing there to ensure that jacket and core are going to stay together and that thing's going to retain, enough mass and enough weight to drive deep. So I don't currently have any, I don't think. Let me look at my pile here. I don't see any. So the last one I'm going to touch on is Berger bullets. Again, Berger bullets, phenomenally popular for elk. The VLD, the Extreme Hunter, stuff like that. My neighbor swears by him. He shoots a 7 SAUM short action ultra mag. Again, he's he's typically shooting elk cross canyon. You know, he shot, I don't remember how many, probably 8 or 9 last time I talked to him with that 7 SAUM and the Berger bullet. He has not experienced any failures. I've seen 2 elk shot with bullets. I have not seen any failures, but I personally don't use them for elk. Again, they're meant to basically, the tip deforms, the bullet starts tumbling, they fly apart. You can get extremely spectacular kills, you know, with bullets on this end. The ballistic tip, the AMAX, the Berger bullets, but you just have no, you know, no bonding, no physical means of ensuring that that bullet stays together and drives deep. Again, I think the vast majority of the time, shot straight into the vitals, those bullets will do what you want them to do. I'm just not willing to risk my elk hunting trip on it. I will say, my nephew was using Bergers last year. Did it again, the 2 elk he put them through, did a shockingly good job. It was the largest exit wound I've ever seen. Both of them completely passed through crossbody on full-size elk. But the thing that concerned me is he then went on to shoot a mule deer with it at about 180 yards, and I was literally picking pieces of the jacket out of the backstrap about 6 or 7 inches from the bullet hole. Just a massive wound through that. And again, I know people want that. They want that quick shock, that sudden, you know, bang flop. They can be spectacular killers. Unfortunately, with like a heavy quartering away shot, or you know, something like that, a shot that you're not expecting, a shoulder shot up close, especially in a high velocity round, they can also just not do what you want them to do. So that's kind of my overview on some of the more common elk hunting bullets. Again, there is no best elk hunting bullet. Anything up here will work. I would stay, you know, at the ELDX and left. That's just my personal opinion. Again, I know there's a ton of guys that are going to tell me they have great luck with Bergers, and I don't doubt that. I've seen it. You know, they've had great luck with ballistic tips, AMAX, some of the other stuff. You know, the guys have been shooting elk with just the Federal blue box soft points for 40 or 50 years and had great luck. So ultimately, it's up to you. Again, I just wanted to give a kind of a quick overview on some of the more popular stuff up there, provide some different options, some different BCs. I, again, would stay too heavy for caliber bullets. I like at least a .25 in 30 cal as far as sectional density, and about a 2.7 or up in pretty much everything else. Yeah, just again, one man's opinion. Try not to roast me too hard. If you have any questions, leave them below. Hit the like and subscribe button. Again, if just a few people that watch each video hit subscribe, eventually I might get to the point where I feel the motivation to go out and buy a better camera. I'll try and get a target camera, do some better videos. Leave me some comments down below. Again, if you're that guy that's been shooting Core-Lokt for 60 years and thinks all these guys with their fancy new bullets are idiots, I completely understand, right? You don't need a fancy, super high BC, shiny new bullet to kill elk. I think there's advantages to some of that, but it's certainly not necessary for traditional ranges. So again, I hope you liked the video. Hit the like and subscribe button, and leave questions or comments below. Hope everybody has a great hunting season. Stay safe, and happy Halloween.